I'll just raise the leaves.
So just like Vicki said, the fall is the perfect time to get ready for spring, actually. So let's see if I can. Oh, I need a support system.
Can we help you?
You want me to come up there and sit?
Yeah, could you? That'd be nice. But the problem is my, oh, it's Peggy twice. I hope Peggy gets in now. The mouse, you have to use this guy, this mouse right here. Thank you. And then when you get done messing with the mouse, you have to put it back over here.
As long as there's no poop on it.
Hey, who knows? It might be, but I mean, I try washing my hands. All right, let's see. We need to, can you just click it for me then too? Like, click it.
Sure.
Push it like that.
And use the mouse.
You can also do this. So the mouse can- Oh, try this one, try the arrow. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Bob. Let me move this off here. Because this is the screen chair right here on this side. I hope Peggy can make it in. Is she making it in? I tested every time. I just use the arrow. Okay. Basically, our learning objectives is we want to improve our soil, which actually improves our habitat for animals. I know it sounds like it's two separate things, but our soil is actually where life occurs. That topsoil, about 4 inches, is what keeps us alive every day. All the food comes from that, all the animals that eat from the garden and the yard and the pasture, they're getting all their nutrients from actually the topsoil, which is made up of a lot of different things, including organic matter, fungus, nematodes, all kinds of good guys. So it's doing all this to create living organisms. The soil is a living organism. And we're going to talk about composting, physically testing our soil, how to know what we even have. We're going to talk about supplementing if necessary, only after you take a soil sample, because you can really mess up some things if you just supplement willy-nilly. And we're going to also talk about leaves, because it's my favorite thing to talk about. And leaves really are magical. They regenerate your soil. They're amazing. They are basically almost all carbon, and carbon feeds the microbes, which basically feeds the soil. It's amazing. So we're going to think about our beneficial insects and where they live, and they usually live in leaves over the winter. Go ahead, thanks, Bob. Is that working? Of course not. So it's humbling, isn't it, Bob? Yes. Just like I said, soil is a living system. In 1 gram of soil, which is really small, very small, 600 million bacteria are in there. Then 15,000 to 20,000 different species of those bacteria. There's like 300 meters of fungus and protozoa, nematodes, beneficial nematodes. I was talking to Jerry about nematodes. He used to do research on nematodes. And you know, nematodes, beneficial nematodes actually kill ticks. So the more beneficial nematodes you have in your soil, the less harmful things that will be around, because they're actually going towards those bad guys, and that's what they eat. I think that's very interesting. So we don't need to be afraid of these things. They're doing good things by eating some of our bad guys. So that's what they eat. Okay. So we're going to talk about taking a soil sample, because it's very important to know what you're dealing with in your soil before you do anything. So this is a picture of a guy, Kurt Emanuel. He's using one of our probes. We actually have probes here. Has anyone ever borrowed our probe and done a soil sample here? Good. Has anyone ever tested their soil without using our probe? Awesome. Good. So there's just a few here that haven't, not very many. And so this kind of basically helps to know what you're dealing with. A good time to do it is fall. You can do it right now. And it costs about $20 to get the basics. You can just get your stuff here to use and borrow. And we send it to A&L Great Lakes. You send it for $20, and you get back recommendations for whatever you're growing. For instance, if you're trying to grow a turf, it might be different recommendations than if you're growing a tree. So talk to me about it. I want to help you about that. But this is really important to do. Basically, he just shows you how to do that. So let me know if you have any questions about that. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, we don't need. So there's different soil labs. You don't have to use the one we use. And in fact, there's different soil labs that do different things. A lady called the other day who wanted to know if she had been sprayed by herbicide. And she didn't know if her neighbor had sprayed her tree and it died. But you can't just send that to any soil lab. You have to, there's a place in Washington that does that kind of sampling, but it takes about, you have to check 500 different chemicals. That's a lot of chemicals. And it costs a lot of money, about $400 to do this test, just to find out there might have been herbicide. So you can't just, I mean, so it depends on what you're testing for what specialty. If you're doing compost, Great Lakes also does compost, check that and test. So that's a different test than your soil test. So there's a lot of different options. Here's a basic soil test form. Just like I was saying, you want to say what you're using, lawn and turf, garden, landscaping. So whatever you're choosing, you just say, hey, I want to grow turf, and they'll give you ideas of what's going on. Go ahead. This is what's really important. No matter how much nutrients you have in your soil, if your pH is not in a proper place, your plants actually cannot take up nutrients. They will starve to death even though the soil is fertile right beside it if it's bad pH. So it just shows right here. I don't know if anybody knows does anybody know what pH is? Awesome, good. What is it? Can you give us a little gist, Don? Do you mind?
It's the alkalinity or the acidity of the soil, with 7 being neutral and 14 is on the high side.
That's right. That's right. So 14 would be more basic, which would be over here, and more acidic would be over here. So this would be more like hydrochloric acid, and up here would be sulfuric acid. So right in the middle, just like Don said, is the middle of, it's called neutral or 7.0. And basically right here, can you see that this is showing the different types of nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, those are the big 3 NPK. Then you see sulfur, calcium, magnesium, those are still some important nutrients. Then you're getting into the micronutrients. But do you notice if you start getting high alkalinity, which is very, very common in Indiana soils, we're going to see some people who share their soil tests with me, and you're going to see that because we live on limestone, that is a very basic material that's coming up through the ground, and it makes us a little bit higher in our range of pH. So I'll see 7.5 pretty often. So if we were at 7.5, if you move down this scale, do you see what's happening with iron right here? You see what's happening with manganese and boron and copper and zinc? So what happens? What is your symptom or sign if your iron is not being uptake? If it's not getting uptake?
Fruit won't set, leaves turn yellow.
Leaves turn yellow, chlorosis, yes. Has anyone seen that before?
This year, because of the excess amount of rain in my rain beds, I had to go and supplement with iron to get my fruit to set.
Yep, Jerry said that he had to supplement because it was so rainy, it was washing out the iron. Yeah, or it was just basically overtaking some of those nutrients, yes. So that's why it's very important to stay within the proper pH, and that's why you want to do a test. And you can buy those ones at Home Depot, but they're not very sensitive. Doing a soil test is more accurate. And like I said, it's only $20, and they suggest doing a soil test about every 3 years to see how your soil is improving. And you want to do it around the same time of year because soil is similar at the same time of year. So here's a soil test result. It's a non-graphic, so it's not very pretty, but they basically have their sample ID, their lab number. That's just for the lab to keep track of so they don't mix them up. And they're looking at phosphorus, that's 98. That's actually VH, means very high. Phosphorus is easy to kind of get high, especially if you're using animal-based manures. Animal-based manures have a lot of phosphorus in them. So just because some is good, more doesn't mean it's better. So you have to remember that. That's why leaves are kind of like amazing because they do not have phosphorus hardly at all. They have a very low amount of phosphorus. So you're getting that nutrient without overwhelming your soil with those phosphorus. It's not even as high as some things, but you just have to watch your phosphorus, because phosphorus is what comes off into the waterways and causes algae blooms and causes hypoxia in the Gulf of Mexico. That's why fish are dying, because they, lose their oxygen. And so we don't want to put too much phosphorus to get into our waterways. Does that make sense? So here they're showing the potassium, magnesium, calcium, and they're saying what those are: very high, high, or medium. Here's soil pH, 7.7. Where does that fall on the pH scale? Is that high or low?
It's alkaline.
It's alkaline, and that would cause what? Did you see how the iron looked? You wouldn't be able to uptake too much iron, would you? So this person is dealing with a problem with their soil pH. So they would give a suggestion to put sulfur onto their garden, and they would tell them exactly how much, but they don't say it right here. But elemental sulfur will lower pH, but you can't do it all at once. You have to do it in increments over a couple of years, because you could overwhelm your soil. So you just do it in increments. But they would tell you the amounts and how long to do it. Thanks, Bob. Here's another soil test report. This person was wanting to ask about vegetable garden, and their pH is 7.4, still high. Down here, they say vegetable garden, the soil pH is high or alkaline, and they want you to put 10 pounds of sulfur per 1,000 square feet in the fall on a yearly basis until that pH slowly goes down. And they probably would want it to be around 7. That's what they're saying. They want it to be right around the middle. That's where plants are most happy. Now, how many people have always heard, put lime on your garden, put lime on your garden? Well, it's because the West Coast, they have more acidic soil, but they're also very big gardeners, and they're like what's on PBS. And so we think, oh, we need to lime our gardens all the time. What would happen if this person put lime on their garden? Their pH would go up, and do you know how long it would take to get it back down? Very long, very long. So be careful not to put things on your garden unless you need to, because it can take a long time. 7.7. These are all people in Hancock County. So you were dealing with high pH here normally, so never put lime on your garden unless you really, really need to. This lady came in the other day, she had horse pastures. She actually had acidic soil, which I really don't know how that happens. So hers was in the 5s. Wow, I know. So guess what she did do? Put lime on her yard, her pasture. It's doing better, but it'll take a while to get that pH neutral. So that was very unusual for around here. I don't know why it was, so I'm not sure. I don't think she even put it on. I think she bought it like that. So I really don't know what was on it. Go ahead. Okay, thanks. Here's acid-loving shrubs. So an acid-loving shrub would be, can someone give me an example of an acid-loving shrub? Hydrangea sometimes, depending. But what's another one? Everyone wants to grow these around here. Blueberries. They always want to grow blueberries. And I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but they don't grow real well in our normal soil. So you have to amend or grow them in a container. So this person has 7.6, but they want to grow acidic loving plants, which are like around 6.5. So if that was going to happen, it says replace the soil in the beds. I mean, if you have all the money in the world. Or just know that we don't grow blueberries real great here, or put them in a container. You know what I mean? So go ahead. Here's some information about different ways we know we're having healthy soil besides our soil test. First of all, just looking at your soil makes a difference. Do you have some earthworms in there? That's a really living soil. Now, if you're in woods, that's totally different. Woods usually don't have a lot of earthworms. Woods are more of a fungus based. In fact, they have networks, and that's how trees communicate. They were the internet before it was cool. And they use their fungal networks to talk and to give information to each other. But worms are in bacterial soils, which is in prairies and normal turf, and what we usually deal with. We're not usually dealing with woodland soils. But if you see earthworms in your soil, about 10 in the top foot of soil, when you first get like a shovelful, man, you're doing great. So that's a good way to know. Also, your tops, go ahead. Does someone have a question? Okay. Topsoil is clearly defined. It's darker than your subsoil. That's good. Now, remember, this might take a while to get to this point. Because let's be honest, when we buy our homes in suburban areas, what they've done is they've actually stripped the topsoil, sold it to make some money. They probably kept some of it, but they didn't keep probably all of it. They're supposed to keep a soil stockpile. We check that in our planning commission notes, but and it just, there's sometimes just a little bit and not much, but you're dealing with a lot of just not topsoil. So you have to build that back up and it takes a long time. Some information about organic matter. If you see some residues, that's a good way to know that you have some living soil, but that's hard to do sometimes because if your microbes are hungry, they'll eat it all. So it just depends. Looking at your roots of your plants will tell you how good your soil is. Have you guys ever pulled out your plants and it's like, whoa, they're so big. That's a really healthy soil. That's a good sign. If you can start putting your hand in your soil without hitting anything, and you start looking like the man from the PBS station, like Liberty Garden or whatever, that guy who was like, he put his hand all the way up to his elbows. That's totally a great soil, but that's hard to do. And then when you hold your soil, what's it like? What's the structure like? You want soil that holds its structure and it crumbles a little bit. And because that is meaning that it has aggregates, it can hold water, and it's holding those nutrients in there. So we have really good soil around here. Even though it's clay, it holds a lot of good nutrients if it's healthy soil. I'm gonna check something. People are entering the waiting room. Let's see if it's 3 pages. Okay. Yep, it's 2 pages and Susan. Let's see if it works. Hope she gets in. Here's some other soil indicators. When you're are you having erosion? If you're having erosion, that means your soil isn't holding itself together very well. It's like falling apart. So if you're getting gullies and stuff, that means your soil is unhealthy. But if you want to look at right after rainfall, and basically if you're having very few gullies, then you're better. But if you get a lot, that's bad. So no gullies, clear or no runoff. So basically when it's running off into your ditch, is it clear or is it bringing dirt with it? Because if it's bringing dirt with it, you have unhealthy soil that's not keeping itself together. Water holding capacity, this is so amazing. So did you see the rain garden out there? We've just planted it. It has not been in there for even a month yet. It just got planted at the end of September. Those plants, even though they're not grown up, they will hold 30% more water than the turf that was there before. So I don't know if you guys ever saw when it would rain, there would be a lot of water right there. It takes forever to go in. So plants and healthy soil hold more water. And we'll just basically nutrient holding capacity obviously increases when you have healthier soil. So this is really neat. The urban soil conservation, which is part of the Soil Water Conservation District, they're all about helping backyard gardeners with their soil because they realize that there's a gap. Yes, NRCS and soil water conservation, they're helping farmers with their soil, but we also need help with our soil and we need resources. So actually they have a mission and a vision. They just started a new statewide program for the Urban Soil Health Association with the Soil Water Conservation Districts. And their whole purpose is to minimize disturbance. That's how you have healthy soil. Just like, remember Teresa was talking about her tilling of her pollinator garden. Tilling actually brought up a lot of weeds, but it also hurts the soil structure. Then maximize soil cover, because if you keep our soil covered, you're first of all helping plants to be covered for the winter and animals and insects, but you're helping the soil because the soil is alive also. It kind of gives them a blanket over the winter. And it's good to keep soil covered over the regular time of the year. Why do you think the summer would be good to have your soil covered? What do you think happens in the summer?
They dry out.
They dry out, yep. It has a lot of transpiration. It gets all that water out of the soil. But if you have like a little blanket over it, you're protecting the soil from losing its its moisture as easily. Maximize biodiversity, which basically is maximizing the microbes in the soil, and provide continuous living roots because it keeps the soil together better when you have roots always in your soil. Okay. That's why you're noticing a lot more farmers, they're doing cover crops. They're starting to realize they don't want to lose their soil either. And they don't want to see it going down the creeks. But it's also scary because it's a whole new way of thinking. So it's going to take a little bit. So let's talk about compost. Compost is a way to cover your soil. What is compost? Does anybody compost here? Marianne does. Yeah. Okay, cool. So Marianne, I know you do leaf compost, which I have a video of you on here. Do you do any other green compost with your
So
inside?
we have a major composting at my house, so
Good.
lots of leaves, and then we've put grass clippings in it for the green, and then we put any kind of scraps from the kitchen that are not animal waste.
Good, awesome. Who else? Don, do you also do it?
Pretty much the same thing as,
Yeah.
I do have a question though. I don't turn mine because it's too much work.
That's you're me after my own heart. I'm the same way. You do not have to do that. If you
I have-
want to work really hard and have your compost faster, you can. But you really don't have to. It just takes longer to
It does.
make.
It takes about 9 months or a year for it to
Yes.
cook down.
Yes, but you know, the fastest way you could do a compost is if you have about a yard cube and you turn it every day, you can get it done in 18 days. And when I say done,
Wow.
done, that you just know it's done. It's first of all gotten into a heat that was correct. There's a temperature, and we actually have a compost thermometer if you want to borrow it because it kills pathogens and stuff. But then you can do it if you really want to work really hard. But I don't like to work very hard. Yes, Marianne?
I have a question
Yes.
about composting.
Uh-huh.
So we compost majorly, and I even had some leftover that took it on the pens, which was like really cool.
Yes.
So the plants that we planted, I provided some compost on
Good.
top of that.
Good.
I have so much that we're kind of using like stuff that was from 2 years ago. So is it okay if it just sits there?
Yes, totally.
For some
Totally
reason
okay.
I got the information and something leaches out of it and it's not as good anymore.
You will lose, so here's the thing, potassium can leach out. Yes, potassium can. So if you really needed potassium in your yard, some people actually put a tarp under it so they don't lose it. I know it sounds crazy, but potassium moves fast. Phosphorus does not move fast in soil. Potassium will just kind of drain out. But you know, you can only do what you can do. Don't be afraid of it. There's usually enough potassium in our soil to be okay. But if you were dealing with like in a sandy soil that you really needed to preserve that potassium, you might put a tarp underneath your compost pile, and then you would not lose your potassium. Does that make sense? So it kind of depends on what soil you're dealing with. Yes.
I had a question. I thought I heard somewhere, and I've been doing it. Adding like garden fertilizer, like 10-10-10, your compost to help speed up the process, or if you don't have any of the greens, you know, all leaves.
I'd be careful just because of phosphorus. I would test your soil, do a soil sample, because if you do 10-10-10, that's nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. Or nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, whichever you want to say, NPK. That phosphorus, you can get too much. And getting too much it can cause other problems. It has to be pretty high, but if you're just doing that over and over again, it can add up and you might not need that much phosphorus. Does that make sense, Bruce?
Yeah, if you just go to the co-op, buy a bag of straight urea,
Which is nitrogen.
Yeah.
it's just it's like 46.00.
That might
And
be
you
better.
just take like a cup or something, if you've got a small compost pile, just sprinkle a little bit on there, mix that in a little bit, and that pile will heat up pretty quick.
Yes, and that might be better than around here, we may have too much phosphorus, but it depends on what your soil is. So that's why it's good to test it before you just add things.
And you're just getting straight nitrogen.
Yeah, nitrogen.
That only helps.
Yes. But you are right, the green stuff is basically the fire that starts the fire burning. But a leaf compost will do that, it's just different, and you're using the microbes to break it down, not necessarily the chemicals. So, just like you probably know when you have hay, you don't want to put it away wet because it can start a fire. You know, plants have energy and they can start things burning. You know what I mean? It's amazing. So. What was that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it is. Go ahead. So basically, the EPA tells us how to make compost. They want us to make compost because we waste, first of all, in the United States, a lot of food waste, and it just goes to landfill, whereas it really could, the nutrients could be used to help our gardens. So basically, it just talks about you want your browns, which are like your leaves or the carbon. You want your greens, just like Bruce was saying, sometimes you don't have enough greens. If you use some yard waste, like any green leaves or your green grass clippings, you can do that. The only thing with green grass clippings, how many people have done a whole big pile of green grass clippings and how did it smell? Stinks up to high heaven. And your neighbors are like, why do you do this to me? So don't do that to your neighbors, but it does work. It does work and it will be a lot of nitrogen. So that's just an idea to get some green stuff in there. Go ahead.
And it's okay, I'm sorry, question. It's okay to put seeds of things like we've been cutting down the honeysuckle. I have not been recycling it or composting it. I've been burning it because I don't want the seeds to, and we don't have a very active compost. So it's okay to put the seeds of plants in there.
That's a good question. People get iffy about, especially invasive plants, because it depends. See, you can always say it depends. And does your compost get hot enough to kill the seeds? You know what I mean?
Okay.
And so it's hard to say.
Okay.
Like they probably just say no overall just to protect you because they don't know how hot your compost gets or even how you do your compost. Or if you're adding green to make it hot.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're not getting that close to 160, it's not going to
Kill the seeds.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. Yes, Lynn.
I have, the way I've been composting was just a really simple way. I got 3 tubs that were like this deep in angle.
So she's showing this about, yeah.
Yeah.
Like totes.
Yeah, totes,
Mhm.
pretty big. And I just threw everything in there. And then when it started smelling bad, that's when I put shredded paper in there.
Okay.
And I never had to add water or anything. And then when the bottom was done, no, that's not the way it is. You do it here. And when it's done, you bring another one up.
Oh, so you're doing 3 stacked?
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
as they go, like this
Yep.
one's done.
Yes. Yes.
Now you start with this.
Yep, yep.
That's what I did. And when, it took 8 months. And when I emptied them out, it was soil.
Yeah.
I was amazed.
That's awesome.
I couldn't believe it.
So she was showing that she basically had 3 totes kind of stacked within each other.
They
And she
have to
would,
be
yeah,
like
they were
this.
like this.
So they
and
can fit
nested
inside.
into each other. And you basically let it split and move its way down. So basically it was filtering itself almost to become soil. Yeah, it's so cool.
I didn't do anything.
So what they suggest if you're living in a neighborhood, well, obviously don't put metal or glass because it can hurt you because you're going to be putting it on your soil eventually. Fats, grease, lard, oils, meat. Now, if you live in the country, you can do that because compost will eat your meat right up. Like it'll eat dead animals. That's an acceptable way to get rid of dead animals, composting. But you have to make sure there's a fence around it so that your neighbor's dog can't come bother it and scare the neighbors. So, but compost will eat it right down and you don't have to dig a 6-foot hole. Because I don't know about you, I don't like digging 6 feet holes when animals die. So it's a nice way, but you can put meat, but just you have to not let your neighbor dogs get it. Okay, so what do you guys think about this? Vermicompost is earthworm castings, which is basically feeding your earthworms and they poo and pee, and then they make an awesome, cool, either tea or their castings, which is a little bit like, looks like soil. Vermicompost is something I was thinking about buying a vermicomposter so we could show people here, maybe kids. And so it'd be part of my programming. What do you guys think? Think that's a good idea to have that and talk about it and show it? Okay, cool. I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna totally buy it. So basically, vermicompost obviously takes less space and it's kind of cool. There's specific types of worms, but any worm would work, but red wigglers work mostly really well in a vermicompost system. Go ahead, thank you. This was really neat. Some research has been done about what vermicompost is good for. And what they found is they actually find here's compost on the left and vermicompost on the right. You can't see it because it's right here. Basically, it shows the different carbon to nitrogen ratio. So basically, there's a low carbon to nitrogen ratio for vermicompost. That means it's very high in fertilizer. It gives plants more roots, shoot weight, and fruit yield of green beans. So they did this research. They're showing what vermicompost does. What I think is very interesting, eventually better quality end product for gardening, and it maximum growth of hormones and microbial numbers with vermicompost. I think there's another section next, because it actually keeps diseases away. Yes. So they had some diseases and pest control by vermicompost. So to look at the disease pests like aphids in the groundnut, I don't even know what a groundnut is, but something, and vermicompost. Vermicompost helped it with those aphids. Basically, there's less aphids on that than it was without vermicompost. So it helps with damping off and root rot in cucumbers and radishes. It helps with damping off with tomatoes. Who knows what damping off means? Yes, Mike, what is it?
Don't ask me to explain.
Okay. Have you ever had it happen?
I
Like
know
when you're
what it
trying to do a
happens.
seedling, what does it look like when it starts damping off? When you have your seedling and you have it inside and you're so happy. Or it like gets that black part of the bottom and just, yes, so it dampens off because it's a type of fungus. But tomatoes are helped using vermicompost from damping off. So it's very interesting. This is kind of unclear why, but basically it helps to prevent pathogens and pests, which I think is interesting. Go ahead. Basically, using compost feeds your soil. So keep your weed seeds out just to be safe, and don't put meat in there for your neighbors, and just kind of look for the carbon to nitrogen. About 25 carbon, which is about 25 like leaves and brown stuff, to 1 nitrogen is a good amount. But you can't really go wrong. You're not going to mess it up if you put too much of one or the other. So here's really interesting talk is this is a chain that was actually found in some leaves. Have you ever seen when the downtown, they put all their leaves out and they come suck them up, or they like put them in bags? Well, there's actually research up at Purdue. This farmer, it's called the Perkins Farm, Goodard Farm. They live on a sandy soil and they're doing compost research because they need compost for their sandy soil to hold nutrients in. And they were given a lot of free bags of what leaves. Well, this was in it. This chain was in it, and that's not a good way to get your iron in your plants, is it? No. But so you got to be careful if you're getting too many leaves from municipal sources. There might be junk in there, so you got to know that there is a risk. And also, you need to probably test it because there could be salts in it from the road, which can actually affect your plants. So don't go too crazy on it without testing it, because you don't want your plants to not grow next spring when you put them on there. Many times though, have you noticed leaves are free lots of times? People don't realize the gold that they're sitting on and they just tell people to take it away. You just basically, it's so easy, you put it in a pile and you can turn it if you want, or just leave it there and it's going to turn into compost. And research with the Perkins Farm and Dr. Roy Hoagland, and she's actually written an article that should be coming out soon in a journal, show how much the plants benefit from this leaf compost. We're going to show you some pictures from the research that she will allow me to share, which I think is really neat.
So what happens to the salt once it heats up?
That's the hard part. I don't think it goes away, but I think microbes could help it. So, but you got to be careful. You know what I mean?
But you have to be careful too with herbicides, like when you have your lawn treated. I don't know how long you're supposed to wait.
That's true.
But I know I won't put it in my compost pile for months, several months after it's been treated.
But so you know what's treated on your yard. Is that what you mean? Yes. Yeah. You have to be careful with that. That's true. And watch out for horse manure, that sometimes horses are given a type of hay that keeps them from having weed seeds. I get kind of confused. It's a type of herbicide in their feed or pesticide that can actually get into their manure and stay there for a really long time. It's a long residual for that. Yes, Glenn?
I just had the vet out because of one of my horses, and he said the GMO
Yeah.
affects horses' lifespan.
Oh, I didn't know that. And GMO stands for genetically modified organisms.
Right. He's found with the study that he's doing that he has Cushing's, that the GMO and the spraying of pesticides and so on and so forth is affecting the pastures where they eat and it affects their health. He thinks that's what's causing Cushing's and
Your horse has Cushing's, no, I'm sorry. And Cushing's is swelling of the
it's
joints.
a tumor on the pituitary gland.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's trying to get him off the medication. I put him on organic feed, which doesn't have any of that in it, and limit his time on grass. And he says, we may be able to get him off the medicine.
Good.
I said, wow.
Good. Thanks for sharing that.
It's good.
This is a Mary Ann's leaf compost, Soil Leaves, and basically you run over it with your mower a couple times and put it over here.
Now, we have a machine that looks like we just sweep it into this mulcher.
Mhm.
And we just we'll spend a couple days, total solid days of just raking them into this thing, it spreads it out. And then it just sits there all winter. And so then we throw in the spring, the grass clippings and the kitchen, and then it sits there. And so that's probably from the year before.
Yeah.
It's just sat there, so it looks like dirt.
Yeah, go ahead and push the video and maybe we'll be able to see how much it looks like soil. Let's see what works. Yeah, there you go. That's just leaf.
That's my compost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool. Go ahead, go ahead. Thanks, Mary Ann. That was an awesome demonstration.
It's a huge pile too.
This is differences observed. Oh, go ahead. Does someone have a question for Mary Ann? Yes.
I don't question Mary Ann. I'm getting a little confused on when do I put the compost in? It's like I'm getting my garden ready.
Yeah, well, you have leaves now, right? So start a compost pile with your leaves. That's
Oh,
what
no,
I'm-
no, I'm not,
Oh.
I've got compost.
Yeah,
I've got to add just some regular soil to it, it's a raised bed.
Yeah.
So I lost some, but put the compost in on top, or do I go ahead and plant a cover crop now and wait and compost it in spring?
that's a good
Actually,
question.
I put the compost on in the spring, but I don't dig it in.
That's what
I find that when you try to make it real pretty for the plant, then the critters come and get in there. And so basically, and actually I spent some time volunteering at the Museum of Art. It was a very, very good Patty.
That's
So
exactly where
Facebook-
Bruce works too.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm Facebook friends with forever with Patty. And so
Oh, okay.
basically, she basically just kind of taught me a whole lot of things. And one of them was, don't dig it in, just spread it on top. And it
Yeah.
really does absorb and take up the nutrients in the
Okay.
soil.
And you could, if you already have compost ready, you could put it on in the winter. It won't hurt at all because it'll take the time to get established in the soil. But you really can't go wrong once you have compost. Except don't put too much, about 1 to 2 inches at most. The reason I say that is sometimes too much again can be overwhelming to the soil. You don't want to overwhelm it. So we get so excited, we want to put like 6 inches. That can actually cause problems. So don't go too excited about it. But you can put it on now if you want, or spring.
Well, that's what I was told, is that you only do it once a year.
Yeah, but you really.
And so that's why that's all sitting there, because it's waiting for the next season. Because once I spread it out, then I'm kind of done now. Not that I don't ever go do some more, but basically it's wait, and you kind of have to be patient, because you want to go, spread it more again.
But that's more fun to work in the winter personally, because it's cooler. So, or fall,
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? But so the reason why people say once a year is just because mostly we do all the work in spring, because we're excited. But it doesn't have to be like that.
Well,
You
just
won't-
once a year, right?
Yes, you don't have to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of benefit in putting it on in the fall where you get snow to melt it into the earth through the
Yes.
winter. As that moisture helps to get it into the soil farther.
Yes, and actually microbes live in the winter also. They're alive. They're not like dead. They need something to eat in the winter also. They're more quiet and they're not as active in the time to eat, but they would be happy to have your compost.
Isn't that what the cover crop helps do?
So the cover crop can help too. So now cover crops, right now, an easy one was given to us that oats, because they die with first frost. Those are super simple, but they won't come up right now, germination probably. You could still do rye, but that is really hard to terminate. And you may need to use glyphosate for that. It can be hard to terminate. Clovers could work, yep. It just kind of depends on your goals. And I don't know if clovers would germinate right now. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think they would. Only rye, I'm pretty sure, germinates up until about 40 degrees.
Could do
turnips. Turnips, yeah, but
Radishes,
Radishes, but
Cold weather, cool weather.
yeah, radishes, when they die, they do smell bad, like especially the daikon radishes. But they will, if you want to cover it, there are some options. Just depends on how you want to kill it.
Winter wheat,
Yes, winter wheat, but it's not the easiest to kill either. I mean, you have to probably use a glyphosate or something. It just depends what you're planting next year, you know what I mean? Here's some differences in observed compost emitted soil that they found in the research they did in the last 2 years. Vigor ratings, which is how the plants grew. Disease ratings, it was better in the ones that had compost. Organic matter increased and phosphorus was the same in terms of it didn't increase with the leaf matter. I only covered these. It's not like they're censored. It's just I didn't want to talk about it. It becomes too scientific and it's like overwhelming. So go ahead. So here's a picture on the left, no leaf compost. This is after 2 weeks of transplanting these tomatoes. On the right, they used leaf compost. That's the only difference they had. Can you tell the difference? Yeah. The one on the right obviously has stronger vigor, and all of it is leaf compost added. Go ahead, Bob. Then they did mature plants after week 9 on the left, no leaf compost. Look at that poor guy, he's all scraggly. And on the right, wow. That's all the difference they had was leaf compost. Go ahead. So that's the vigor ratings, looking at just with our eyes. So phosphorus management, if you have too much phosphorus, leaf matter is really important. Because like I said, if you've gone crazy with animal manure, you may have too much phosphorus, which could actually eventually cause your plants not to be uptake some micronutrients. You have to have a pretty high phosphorus, but you might. So just test your soil. And so that's what's nice about leaves is you're not adding more phosphorus to your soil. Go ahead. Thanks.
George.
Yeah.
Georgia.
This is cool, the yield results. So basically they're looking at 2019 and 2020 averages. There's different types of tomatoes. The top was called Wisconsin 55 and the bottom is Carbonero. Yeah, whatever. And basically it showed with leaf compost, it added 88% more good fruits and they were 56% more weight. So it's not just about the numbers, it's about how big those bad boys are. And then the bottom is, you can read it, 71 and 76. What's neat, how many of you had some flooding because of all the water recently? Anyone flooding in your yard? Yep. So we're only going to get more water in Indiana. Climate change is happening. We're talking about it more. By the year 2050, we're going to be about our heat. We'll be able to have zone 8 plants. This is going to happen. I hope nothing happens really past that. It depends on our decisions now, because at the end of the century, it will be worse. But in Indiana, and it doesn't mean all the states are the same. Indiana, we're just going to be warmer and wetter. And we're going to get more water. And we're going to be basically having zone 8 planting and around our frost state of Kentucky. So we're going to have longer growing seasons, which will be fun. And we'll be able to probably grow plumerias. That's going to be cool. But we're going to have a lot more water, and we already have a lot of water that happens in spurts. So soil organic matter holds water. And that soil organic matter is those microbes and those leaves. It can hold up to 90% of its weight. So imagine that leaf compost pile that Marianne showed. That's probably, I don't know how many pounds that leaves are right there, maybe 500. 90% of its weight would be, minus 500. 50 would be 450. It would hold that much water in that one place. In theory. But the point is, you want more water to be held in the soil, and soil organic matter helps with that. But we don't want to go too crazy. There's enough soil organic matter, about 4% is healthy. You don't want to go too crazy. Yes, Marianne?
I do want to say it makes a difference in my house because I live on a hill
Yes, and you probably don't lose them.
and I don't lose as much water.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you also not have to water as often? Do you have to water your plants?
I don't know. The only time I ever water is a new plant.
Marianne says she doesn't have to water unless it's a new plant. So how many people would love to not water their garden? I would, yes. Because first of all, if you live in the city, it costs money for water and it's only going up. And obviously it's more work. So who wants to do that? So basically using compost or growing your soil organic matter through whatever you want to do, mulching or whatever, is going to hold up water. And those plants will be happier in droughty summers. Go ahead, Don. Oh, pollinators, you can go to the next one. So we're gonna talk about why pollinators are important. Here's my honeybees. Honeybees are not native. They're actually called invasive. When I first heard that, I was so sad. I keep honeybees and I thought, oh man, that hurts my feelings. But actually, bees are also good because we can do experiments on them to know what other pollinators are dealing with. But bees are generalist eaters. So if we don't have our specific foods for our specialist bees, the honeybees will just eat all their food because they can eat almost anything. Whereas specialist bees, we have like so many hundreds of kinds of bees in Indiana, but they only live like within 300 yards of where they're hatched. And they only eat certain foods. So we need to think about those specialist bees. It's actually specialist bees that do the majority of orchard pollinating for apples because they come out at 40 degrees, these orchard bees. But we give the honeybees credit because there's more of them that come out at 50 degrees. But those orchards are getting a lot of benefit from our natural bees, but we just don't see them because they're solitary. They live alone. They don't live in huge hives. And these are they get the accolades, but really it's our specific bees that are doing a lot of the work.
So the orchards try to have those kinds of bees, but
I
there's
mean,
not a hive for them?
that's right. There's no hive for them. They're learning that, interesting. They're learning that planting diversity around an orchard or any kind of place that needs pollination, like a pumpkin patch, it's actually more beneficial to have diversity around that than to have honeybee hives. Because you're basically growing your specific bees around you. Yes, isn't that interesting? It just shows the different types of honeybees, and that's kind of the way it is with solitary bees, but again, they're solitary, they live alone. And you know where they're living? They're laying eggs in the ground. They're gonna be laying eggs in stems that are left over. They're gonna be laying eggs in parts of wood that you just have kind of on the side of your yard. So having kind of a messy yard in some places that's allowed is actually good for your pollinators.
You have an example of a solitary bee?
Yes.
Yellow jackets, are they solitary?
No, those are a wasp. Those are a type of wasp. So a solitary bee is a leaf cutter bee. They're the ones that make like little holes in your leaves and they go to make their little nest and they're just pollinating things that we don't even know exactly what they're pollinating, but they are a specialist solitary bee. Yep. Bumblebees, you see bumblebees all the time on our asters out here. They're a solitary bee. I mean, well, they have small homes, but they have very small amounts of bees compared to honeybees. And the queen will only live over the winter. She's the only one who lives. Yeah. Go ahead, Mom. Which one do you think is a superior pollinator? We give honeybees all the credit. You see what they're doing? This is their pollen basket on the left. She's shoved that so tight. There's not much pollen coming out. But what is this bumblebee doing? It's covered. It's not holding it all tight. So which one do you think is the more superior pollinator? On the right, because she's accidentally just going to pollinate anything she comes in contact with. Yes. Lightning bugs. How many people have seen less lightning bugs since they were younger? Yes. Do you call them lightning bugs or do you call them fireflies? Well, people sometimes call them fireflies, and you know what their baby, like their larvae is called? Glowworms, yes. And guess where they live? They live in the ground and right on top of the ground, right underneath the leaves. That's how they live over the winter. Sometimes they take about 2 years to become lightning bugs, but if you're killing grubs in your yard, you're killing lightning bug glowworms also. So be careful. Don't just willy-nilly throw out your grub control and think about maybe having a space over there for your lightning bugs, maybe putting some leaves over there in a place that your neighbors won't see, and you may see lightning bugs come next year. So just think about their pollinators also. Lightning bugs are actually a pollinator. Go ahead, you can go to the next one. It's kind of boring. Go ahead.
That one's really boring.
That's really boring, isn't it? Yeah, resources. Definitely talk to Soil Water Conservation District. They're all about pollinators. In fact, the NRCS wants you to grow pollinator patches. If you have a large property, I don't know how many acres, it has to be about ½ acre. They will help fund it. They may give you a part of the loan. I'm not really sure, but you talk to our FSA, which is Farm Service Agency, and our NRCS, which is right down the road at 40. And you might be able to get some money to plant pollinator yard, acre, ½ acre, whatever it is. So talk to them because they know how important pollinators are. And definitely get your soil tested if you haven't already. And that's pretty much good. That's good. Anybody have any questions?
I do.
Yes.
Bob and I were talking Saturday about the gray piles of whatever in farmers' fields, and Bob said he thought it was lime, and we said, well, wait, that's the wrong direction. Why would they be liming their field and reducing the pH? Do you have an answer to
Well, I
that?
don't know their soil test. Hopefully they're testing.
They're big on soil testing.
Yeah, they wouldn't be wasting inputs if they didn't need it.
Now, it could be a fertilizer, but a lot of times most of them that, I don't farm physically, I help farm and have for years. They, about every third year, they'll lime to help loosen the soil, is what they do. What they said, they do it to try and loosen the soil. Now, good things happening, if you notice, they're starting to do more with the cover crop. Now, I'm seeing more of that right now since the beans are being harvested. You start looking at the bean fields around right now, you're gonna see a lot of green coming up. Because they're all going in there and starting to put a cover crop on. That come spring, they'll put burn down on there, and then they'll plant no-till, they'll plant corn.
So also that gray stuff might also be gypsum.
It could be.
Gypsum is not lime.
No, it's not. It's
Gypsum,
different. That's
yes, that is different. So it does look similar though, but it does not raise the pH. It's more about soil tilt. It's about the soil texture. So that might be part of it. Plus farmers right now are dealing with a lot of water, so they don't want to have compaction. That might be part of trying to probably prevent that compaction in the spring.
That big equipment now really does compact the soil
Yes.
a lot.
And they're just trying to get the farms, the fields clear because the water, the rain is going to keep them out of the field. So whatever it takes, they may have to have ruts and they may have to deal with compaction, but they're just trying to get the corn beans out.
Doesn't the gypsum break up the clay soil?
Yeah, it does.
Well,
Yep, it basically makes that tilt. Yep, that might be what's happening. So I'm not sure. Yes, Greg.
I have a question for the poop lady.
Yeah, poop lady, that's right.
In your backyard little compost pile.
Yeah.
And your little house pet that poops on it. What's your position on if you put any of that in there?
Okay, so if you're going to compost your dog poop, you wouldn't want to use that on your vegetable garden. Because depending on that disease that your dog could have, I'm not saying your dog's disease, but let's say it is, we can get the same disease,
Yes.
especially the same worms. So you could totally put that on your ornamentals. Yes, you
Okay,
could.
anything other than
Not
a vegetable garden?
correct.
Yeah, it's got the E. coli in it.
Yeah, it's got the E. coli and other things, other fun worms. Because I'm guessing you give your dog heartworm medicine
Go ahead
every
and do
month.
it. No, I don't have a dog.
Oh, okay, well, you have to give your dog heartworm medicine regularly because here's the deal, they're always gonna have worms.
oh, yeah.
They always have worms and you don't want. Who's had worms? I'm just kidding. I have them. Yeah, but not dog worms, people worms, I know. It was kindergartners, they're so
No.
gross.
For the dogs that walk through the neighborhood.
Anybody have
Every
any
once in a
other
while.
questions?
Nice.
They were
Lots of little bit.
Yes. Wasps can pollinate, but they're also predators and they're eating like your bad caterpillars. They are taking your caterpillars and feeding their babies. They're carnivores, but they also do eat nectar for energy, just like we like carbohydrates and proteins. They're the same way. So wasps do play a good role in the ecosystem, but don't step into their nest. You gotta watch where you're walking. It's dangerous.
Would
Yes,
bees,
it is.
or would bees, pollinators?
Wood bees are pollinators, yep.
Darn.
Houseflies are pollinators.
They got a little cabin, you know what they're doing to it, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, you have to sometimes do what you have to do. Carpenter bees, yeah.
Yeah.
I know everyone hates carpenter bees, yeah.
All face horns.
Bald-faced hornets, yeah, I saw your hornet nest, but they do freeze out,
now.
yeah, with the frost. But you know, people buy those nests.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll buy them. Anybody have any other questions at home? I can hear you at home if you want. Hope you can hear me.
She's trying to ask questions.
That's it, Vicky.
She's going to home.
Thanks so much, Lane.
Really good.
A lot of great information.
Thanks guys for being here and it'll be recorded, but it'll take me a few days to do that, you know, and Teresa will send it out. So thanks so much for being here.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Take care.
Don't interrupt, do you?
So I know where I was going to answer. And you'll know.
Well, I didn't drop off.
Okay. Got any
We'll go
leads?
run our tour.
Still bring the kids up. I'm sure you do.
Yeah, someday.
Good,
As long as I don't have to break.
Yeah, and they really don't.
I got, let's say, as of today, my rate 3 horses, it's about 150 gallon, no, 50 gallon bag of litter.
Gotta go do it.
Excuse me.
I buy my bag and, yeah, that,
It is.
they have kind of a more of an industrial type bag. And they sell in the big, they sell in the big little.
Where do you go?
Yeah.
Actually.
And,